Week 3 of college football is here, and we've had 2 weeks under our belt to discover who might be championship bound and who might be an absolute bust. I'm Nathan Johnston here with my co host, Brad Hopkins. It's time to break the huddle. Brad, week 3, like I mentioned, not the biggest matchups we can think of as far as, there's rivalries, there's going to be some close games in terms of spread. But in terms of big game matchups, we've got a decent one on Friday night we're going to cover here in a second. But for the most part, you got to be feeling pretty good if you're a top team heading into week 3. Quick thoughts on week 1 and week 2 so far, and what are you looking forward to in week 3?
Yeah, man, it feels good. College football is in full swing. We've got the NFL back for our listeners that are NFL fans. So football's underway. Nate, the big thing that stands out to me is two things. First of all, is there's a lot of teams that we talked about are favorites in their conference or favorites for the national championship, and they just haven't looked good. Alabama comes to mind. Of course, Clemson obviously comes to mind. Oregon has looked really, iffy. Some teams have just not looked that good. And obviously, I think that the huge storyline of the year is Florida State starting 0-2. We're not talking about Florida State Memphis this week, but would love to hear everyone's thoughts in the comments. Does Florida State start out 0-3? Because Memphis is a really, really good team, but if Florida State starts out 0-3, I'm not saying Mike Norvell's on a hot seat, but I think there's going to be some question marks, Nate, in Tallahassee about, is this the right man for the job? So, like you said, not a lot of huge games this week, but it's a critical week for some teams with the opportunity to get themselves back on track.
Absolutely. And as you can see down at the bottom, our records as stand. I'm currently 7-5. Brad, I believe you're 8-4, and Rooster, who is 9-3, is on a 2-week suspension from Break the Huddle. He'll be back at some point, but he'll be back in the mix. But he's leading right now as the guest picker of the year. Going to have some other guest pickers on throughout the year, so it'll be exciting to see what kind of rankings they can come up with. That being said, let's jump right into it, Brad. Let's waste no one's time. First game of the week is on a Friday night, actually. And this is a great matchup. This one is being played on Friday night, 7 p.m. on ESPN, UNLV versus Kansas. And I say versus Kansas, as y'all know, Kansas's stadium is actually being renovated this year. So they'll be playing at Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City, Kansas. I believe this is where the professional soccer team plays at, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Brad has it confirmed. Kansas currently favored in this game by 7. This is an intriguing matchup, Brad. Barry Odom leads his UNLV Rebels out to Kansas to take on the Kansas Jayhawks. And these are two prominent programs that have had decent success in the last couple of years. We saw what Jalen Daniels could do last year, been banged up back and forth, and now he's got a chance to hopefully get a full season under his belt. Brad, I'll turn it over to you with thoughts on this game and who comes out on top in Kansas City.
Yeah, Nate, we've talked about Kansas, I feel like, a lot here on Break the Huddle. We're both big fans of head coach Lance Leopold. He has done an incredible job there in Lawrence. Of course, that's such a tough place to recruit, and Kansas has, of course, never been an historical program. In the win-loss column, they've been more known for the 3-9, the 2-10 seasons, but he's turned that program around. It came as a really big surprise to me last week when they slipped up against Illinois. This is one of the teams, probably one of the 5 or 6 teams, that was one of the favorites in a wide open Big 12. And look, that was a non-conference game. Man, they've got everything to play for in their season. It's a disappointing loss, but still, all their achievements, all their goals are still very, very much in front of them. You mentioned Jalen Daniels. They need this guy to stay healthy, and so far he's been good. And Nate, the completion percentage is not great on the year. He's 27 for 47, so they need to get that completion percentage up. Devin Neal, their talented running back, they need to get him going. He's been good so far, averaging 9.7 yards per carry, so that's good numbers. But man, Nate, you mentioned, and I know you're a huge fan of Barry Odom, what he's doing out at UNLV, and they run a really, really unique offense. So if you get a chance to watch this game, watch it. Their offensive coordinator, Brennan Marion, who's kind of jumped all over the place. He was at Texas a couple years ago, but they run a very, very interesting offense. And Nate, just kind of researching this game, this was a guy I was not familiar with, but UNLV starting quarterback, a guy by the name of Matthew Sluka, um, actually came from Holy Cross. So one of these FCS to FBS transfers. And man, what a year he's having. 5 touchdowns, 1 pick. But Nate, he's also the leading rusher for this team. But man, it blew my mind. On the year, 111 carries, 699 yards. Man, this team runs the football and they're good. So Nate, my prediction, I think UNLV keeps it extremely close. I like this team. I think we're both of the opinion that Barry Odom probably is going to get some offers if they have another really good season. He's going to get some Power Four offers. I think so, and I think you would agree with that because look, this guy had some good seasons at Missouri, but I think Kansas. I think Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal make just a few more plays. I think they've got a few more playmakers, and Kansas wins this one in a close one. 7, I could see that. I think it's going to be close going to the fourth quarter, and Kansas just finds a way to win.
Yeah, Brad, and you bring up some great points. I mean, you talk about Jalen Daniels, you talk about Barry Odom, you talk about Matthew Sluka, who the transfer from Holy Cross has put up some great numbers. Listen, this UNLV team in the last 2 games, and I get it, it's first 2 weeks against Cupcakes, but they've outscored their opponent 99-21. This is a team that likes to put up a lot of points, and they've proven it on defense. Barry Odom, big on defense, loves to be physical at the point of attack, and I think to your point, it's a 7-point spread. It dropped down or went up a little bit, I think, to 7.5. But either way, around that 7 range, you got to believe that this is going to be a pretty close game. When you look at Kansas, though, look at a running back like Devin Neal, 22 carries, 213 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's averaging 9.4 yards per carry right now, and that's pretty good. Kansas can keep that up, and I mean that's a first down every run, pretty much, right? So when you look at the Kansas Jayhawks, you got to believe RPO, they're going to have a good chance in this one. UNLV is going to have to slow down that run game if they're going to have a chance. They're going to have to force Jalen Daniels to throw it. Barry Odom's got to say, make Jalen beat us in the pass game. And I think in the end, though, I agree with you. I think Jalen Daniels has a good game. I think he's just slightly better. I think Sluka is going to be playing in a hostile environment in Kansas, and I think the Kansas Jayhawks slip this one out. Let us know down in the comments you believe is going to win this matchup between the UNLV Rebels and the Kansas Jayhawks. Our next matchup keeps us in the state of Kansas, not too far from Kansas City, where the number 20 Arizona Wildcats hit the road to take on the number 14 Kansas State Wildcats. The Battle of the Wildcats. Wow, never thought I'd be seeing this. 8 p.m. kickoff on Fox. This is also a Friday night game. Kansas State currently favored by 7.5 points at Bill Snyder Family Stadium in Manhattan, Kansas. Brad, we've seen these 2 programs make a jump. We saw Kansas State make a big run at the Big 12 a couple years ago. We saw Arizona have their phenomenal season under Jed Fish, who has now moved on to be the new head coach at Washington. So these 2 programs are coming out swinging, hoping that both of them can make the Big 12 championship game at the end of the year. Give us your takes on this top 20 matchup and who comes out on top for the Wildcats.
Man, Nate, I a little upset. I mean, I'm glad this was on Friday night because this is a game that I can really focus on and watch. But I feel like if this was on Saturday, game day would be there, be an incredible environment. But still think you're going to have a really, really fun time. Want to start off with Kansas. Kansas is a team that I really liked preseason, and I still do. But they, to me, were I will say a little bit of the dark horse in the new Big 12. And Nate, going into week 3, I'm still trying to figure out who Arizona is. We saw week 1 against New Mexico. They put up 61 points, but gave up 39. And then last week against Northern Arizona, only gave up 10, but only put up 22. So I think it's an interesting week of who Arizona is. They're bringing in, of course, they're led under new coach Brent Brennan, who comes over from San Jose State. I still think he's trying to figure out the identity of his team and everything, but we do know that they're led by an unbelievable 1-2 punch in quarterback Noah Fafita, wide receiver Tatoria McMillan. This is one of the best 1-2 punches. I think McMillan maybe the best wide receiver in football. If not, he's a top 2 or 3 guy. He is just incredible with his size, his strength, his speed. I mean, just unbelievable numbers that he's put up so far. Already 4 touchdowns on the year. Um, Nate, I'm just like I said, Arizona's a team I really like, but I don't know about them. Are they this great offensive team? Are they where's the defense at? It's tough to figure them out because of the total opposites in games they've had. Meanwhile, Kansas State they're 2-0 right now. They were really the heavy favorites in the Big 12, dominated week 1, and then last week had a tough game playing against the Tulane Green Wave and were able to stick it out. Nate, this one comes down to me simply. Avery Johnson's a really talented sophomore quarterback. They've got a really good running back in DJ Giddens. And if you've watched Kansas State football, and if you know anything about Chris Kleiman, they want to be physical. You know that they're going to tackle well. And this one being in Kansas State, I ultimately think that plays a factor. I think it's going to be very close. I think it's going to be a very physical football game, and to me, that's the difference. I think Kansas State is just going to bully Arizona a little bit more. I think they're just going to be more physical on both lines of scrimmage, and Kansas State finds a way to get it done. And they come out of this game Friday night as the big favorites, continuing in the Big 12.
Yeah, Brad, you mentioned bully ball at its finest, right? And when you look at Kansas State, that's what their culture is built on. Midwest physicality at its finest. And I think with the promotion, OC Connor Riley was the former offensive line coach last year. Now he becomes OC. He's going to be play calling this game to keep Noah Fafita off the field. That's how they win this game. You give DJ Giddens the ball. He had 114 yards, I believe, last week against Tulane. And that's going to be the key to victory for Kansas State. I'm going to take Kansas State. This one's pretty easy for me. As much as I love Noah Fafita, you mentioned McMillan, kind of limited last week, only had 2 receptions. Then they pulled him from the game. I don't know if he's injured. I looked at the injury report. He wasn't listed as injured, but who knows what's going on? Is he having a nagging injury? We don't know. We're going to find out Saturday if he gets a little bit more playing time. Maybe they just didn't feel the need to get him as many reps last week. But nonetheless, I think both of these teams are playing for something big in the Big 12. This is their first in-conference game of the year. They're going to come out swinging. I really like what Brent Brennan is doing so far in his first year with Arizona. A lot of people are skeptical of the hire. If he gets a road win in this game, talk about a confidence booster, Brad.
Absolutely.
In the end, though, I'm going to take Kansas State. I think, to your point, home field advantage, Manhattan, Kansas, they love their football. This is all they've got. They got the Chiefs, but I'm telling you, the Kansas State fans, they love the Wildcats of Kansas City. Give me should I just play it safe and say give me the Wildcats? No, give me the Kansas State Wildcats. Let us know down in the comments who you believe will win this game. Our next game of the week takes us up north to Madison, Wisconsin, where the number 4 Alabama Crimson Tide coming to town to take on the unranked Wisconsin Badgers. This is a 12 o'clock kickoff on Fox Saturday early, big noon kickoff. Alabama favored by a whopping 16 points in this one, heading into Camp Randall Stadium. Again, just like every other matchup and every week, these two teams have a lot to prove. Luke Fickell entering year 2 as the head coach for the Wisconsin Badgers. Can he take that next step forward, or in Wisconsin terms, take that leap or that jump, no pun intended? And on the other side, Kalen DeBoer, first-year head coach, filling in the shoes of Nick Saban for the Crimson Tide. Everyone's skeptical of, is he the right hire? I don't know if anyone could be the right hire when it comes to matching up with a guy like Nick Saban. But nonetheless, he's ready. He played in the national championship last year. Now he gets his first road test in Madison, Wisconsin. Brad, I'll turn over to you. Thoughts on this game and who comes out on top in Madison, Wisconsin?
Nate, man, this is such a fun one. Alabama going up to Madison, and I was reading on some of the Alabama boards today. They're really excited to get up north, just to experience that environment. You mentioned the great tradition of jump around there to start the fourth quarter. And man, Camp Randall's a place that I hope to get to someday. Sticking, along the lines of Wisconsin, I really like Luke Fickell. I was a big fan of him at Cincinnati and what he did. and I think he's going to do good things there at Wisconsin, Nate. But I think you're seeing early so far this year. It's year 2 for him. He's still trying to build a culture there. He's still trying to really put his trying to put his fingerprint and his identity on that program. They're 2-0. Look, they've got 2 wins, but they haven't been impressive or anything. And Nate, I think a big storyline for Wisconsin is they're still trying to get used to this air raid offense under Phil Longo. Phil Longo is one of my favorite offensive coordinators in college football. I think you look at the stops where he's been incredible, and he's going to get Wisconsin, I think explosive on that side of the ball because, for years and years we knew Wisconsin would come out and, with a fullback or 2 tight end sets and just really, we talk about bully ball here on this channel on Break the Huddle, and that's what Wisconsin was known for. And so when Luke Fickell was hired here, he wanted to, get a little bit more modern, obviously in college football. And I say all that to say is Wisconsin's still trying to gel and still trying to figure things out on offense. Tyler Van Dyke hasn't been bad. He hasn't set the world on fire. And their running game, they're still trying to figure things out. Look, I think just Wisconsin being very hyped for this game, even though it's going to be an 11 o'clock local time kickoff, I think the crowd's going to be really, really into this one. And Wisconsin's going to come ready to play. We know they're going to be physical. We know they're going to play good defense. But jumping over to Alabama, of course, you mentioned Kalen DeBoer. Alabama, Nate, to me, they were sleepwalking for 50 of the 60 minutes in that game last week. And look, South Florida, I will say, up until about, 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, South Florida had a chance to win that game. And Alabama really, really showed, I thought, some weakness on the offensive line. They had some issues on the offensive line. They're hoping to get Caden Proctor back soon. And I'm going to say, Nate, we're both here to own up, when to eat a little crow when we're wrong. And I will say, I was a little bit of a doubter with how Jalen Milroe filled into this system. And look, season's young, we're only 2 games in, but I've been impressed so far. They've done some things, getting him on the perimeter, giving him some quarterback design runs, but he's looked good so far. I think you've seen a little bit development in him as a passer. They've got a really, really good 1-2 punch running back with Jan Miller and Haynes. But the guy I want to talk about is phenom freshman Ryan Williams. He's 17 years old. He's so electric. 6 catches, 207 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think they're going to continue to look for ways to get him the ball. They're going to continue to look for ways to get him touches. Nate, I've said this a couple weeks now with these big matchups. I feel like just because Wisconsin is going to be so hyped and they're going to play with a lot of energy, I think this game's going to be close for about 2.5 quarters. And then Alabama's depth, their athleticism, and just their overall team talent pulls away in the fourth quarter. I'm going to take Alabama by 17 in this one. And I know I'm only 1 point over the spread there, but I think Alabama, especially defensively, their speed and their athleticism shows. They get a couple of sacks on Tyler Van Dyke. The pocket starts to shrink, and he starts to feel the pressure. So give me the Crimson Tide in a very, very tough environment in Camp Randall on Saturday.
Yeah, Brad, I want to ask you real quick, who's the backup quarterback for Alabama?
I believe it's Ty Simpson.
Okay, well, you're gonna be seeing a lot of him on Saturday. This game's not even going to be close.
Okay.
Look, I'm just going to be straight up with you. We can say all we want about Wisconsin, Luke Fickell. He might be out the door next year, and I know that's a hot take, but Brad, I'm telling you, you bring in a guy like Tyler Van Dyke, has not played great. He's got 1 touchdown through 2 games, and they haven't even played anyone tough. Then you look at their run game. Their lead running back, Malusi, is averaging 3.8 yards a carry. You can't do that at Wisconsin. I mean, that's terrible. And again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I hope the fans are ready for jump around in the fourth quarter because that's about the only time they'll be standing up in this game. I'm just going to be straight up. I understand. Look, Alabama's got their struggles, but when you look at their roster versus Wisconsin's, they're far superior. Ty Simpson would make that Wisconsin team look like a top 10 team. And that's not to say that they would be a top 10 team, but that's how bad their quarterback play has been. Nothing against Wisconsin, nothing against Luke Fickell, but I'm going to be honest with you, Brad. This one, in my eyes, is not going to be close. Give me Alabama by 30 points.
Oh, man.
Let us know down in the comments if you think I'm wrong. I'm here for the hate. Bring it on. Yeah. Our next game takes us to the Northwest in Seattle, Washington, where the Washington State Cougars play on a neutral sighting against the Washington Huskies. This is a 3:30 kickoff on Peacock. That's right, on Peacock. No national TV exposure for this big-time rivalry. I know Brad will have his 2 cents to throw in about that. Only a 5-point spread in this one, Brad. Washington favored in this one by 5 at Lumen Field, like I mentioned, where the Seattle Seahawks play. Surprised, but not surprised. This is a neutral sighting, big in-state rivalry, and you got to believe both fan bases are ready for this game come Saturday. I'll turn it over to you, Brad. Thoughts on this matchup and who comes out on top in this in-state rivalry?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Well, first of all, college football, let's do better. I get that we all have streaming services, but come on, college football, we're too good to be streaming the Apple Cup, which I think is it's an awesome name for a rivalry. Washington State, just 2 fun teams. College football, we are too good to be streaming on Peacock. Let's get it together. And this is not a hate on Peacock. I love Peacock. The Office is my favorite show. But come on, why are we streaming? That ran over. Let's get back to break the whole football here, man. The Apple Cup, so much fun. I've been watching this game, for years, ever since I was a little kid, because we're used to it being. I think most of the time on Thanksgiving weekend, it'd even be like the day after Thanksgiving, and just such a fun game. With these 2 teams out on the West Coast, you really don't hear about, how passionate these fans are. But these 2 fan bases, I mean, I won't say they hate each other, but hey, they don't get along at times. I am such a fan of Jed Fish. This was such a great hire by Washington to get him. And, Kalen DeBoer did such a good job, but I think Jed Fish, man, Nate, I think Jed Fish is just going to continue to keep the Huskies on top. Now, we all know they're coming into a very, very tough Big Ten, and Washington's got to find their place. They got to find their footing, but Jed Fish is going to get it done. Want to talk about real quick, quarterback Will Rogers, of course. He transferred from Mississippi State, and he's been really, really solid. 5 touchdowns, no picks. He's got weapons all over the field. Their running back Jonah Coleman is off to a good start. I do want to talk about their leading sack guy, Zach Durfee. This guy's got great size at 6'5", 256. Has just really, really played well. 2.5 sacks and 8 tackles so far in 2 games. For Washington State, they're led by quarterback John Mateer, who has had a really good season so far. He's a sophomore, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. Nate, simply for me, this comes down to I think Washington is just more explosive on that side of the ball. 5 points. I mean, Nate, you know so well. We both know that these rivalries, you just don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to take the Huskies in this one. Once again, I think Will Rogers makes some plays in the 3rd and 4th quarter, and Washington ends up pulling away and taking this one at Lumen Field.
Yeah, Brad, this is a really, really good matchup when you look at these 2 teams going head-to-head. 5-point spread, as I mentioned. Both teams 2-0. And look, Washington State, let's be honest, they got left behind in the Pac-2 now with Oregon State. Oregon State playing Oregon. We don't cover that game this week, but that could be a tough game too for Oregon. When you look at this matchup specifically, I also want to mention about Peacock, just real quick, shame on college football for doing that. But hey, at least it's a 3:30 kickoff, not a 10 p.m. kickoff. So if you do have streaming service, it's going to be you're in luck. It's during prime time. I want to mention quarterback John Mateer for the Washington State Cougars, 467 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He also leads the team in rushing, which is not necessarily a good thing. 252 yards, 2 touchdowns. Has a beautiful head of lettuce, an absolute horse mane. If you see the side hair, it is fantastic. Then you want to mention wide receiver Kyle Williams, 5 receptions, 162 yards. He's averaging 32 yards a catch, Brad. That's crazy. 3 touchdowns. First year without Cam Ward. We see what Cam Ward's doing down at Miami. John Mateer had a lot of big shoes to fill, I should say. And then you look at the other side. You mentioned Jed Fish, first-year head coach for the Washington Huskies, and what he was able to do to rebuild that Arizona program. I think a lot of people took that for granted, and I don't think people understand in that market how hard it is, especially being in the Pac-12, to do what he did with that program. Absolutely fantastic job. And in the end, most guys stayed at Arizona. There were a couple of guys that transferred over with him to Washington, but props to those guys who stayed at Arizona to keep the legacy going and what Jed Fish was able to build there. With that being said, keys to victory here. Washington State's going to come out swinging. This is a big game for them. A lot of hype behind it. They feel left out. They feel ticked off. They're going to come out swinging. Can they control the tempo? Can they overcome the jitters? And then secondly, Washington needs to pressure the quarterback. This is a young guy in John Mateer. Washington has to get pressure early to Washington State. If they can do that, they're going to come out on top. And with that being said, I'm taking the Washington Huskies to win this one in a close one. 31-24 is my final score prediction. Let us know down in the comments who you believe is going to win the Apple Cup, this in-state rival between Washington and Washington State. Let's head back out west to the Midwest, I should say, to Fort Worth, Texas for a Big 12 matchup, one of a kind, one that we are still getting used to. The UCF Knights go on the road to take on the TCU Horned Frogs. 7:30 kickoff on Fox, and UCF currently favored in this one by 2.5. And Brad, this spread has been wavering back and forth. I think I looked last time and TCU was favored by 0.5. So this one keeps going back and forth. I don't know which one it is exactly. I don't know if you have it pulled up, but they're playing at Amon G. Carter Stadium, like I mentioned, in Fort Worth, Texas, home of the TCU Horned Frogs. And this is a big game for both coaches. Sonny Dykes versus Gus Malzahn, both very experienced college football coaches in their own regard. But, Brad, this is their first game this season in the Big 12 for in-conference play without Texas and Oklahoma, and both are hoping to get back to the promised land. UCF for the first time, and obviously we saw TCU get there just a couple years ago. Give us your take on this game and who comes out on top in Texas.
Yeah, Nate, you brought up an interesting point. These are two coaches that are very experienced. They've been around the game a long time. We saw some really good moments for Gus Malzahn at Auburn, but then there were some times that it was not good. And of course, this final couple of years there, Auburn struggled. Meanwhile, Sonny Dykes, I believe now in his third season at TCU, of course, the first season they made the national championship and then took a big step back last year. So I would say two coaches that in no way am I suggesting that they're on the hot seat, but this is to start off the 2024 season. This is a critical game for them because they have an opportunity to really, really get Big 12 play going in the right direction with a win, or the loser here is going to have to start figuring some things out. So two coaches that are at an interesting crossroads. Want to start off with TCU, and looking at TCU, they're going to throw the ball around, and they're going to put up big numbers. Their quarterback Josh Hoover, 620 yards in 2 games, 4 touchdowns, no picks, and they have got a very impressive receiver in senior Savion Williams. This guy goes 6'5", 225. He's big. He's physical. A 50-50 ball is more like an 80-20 for him. I mean, he is just very, very good at those jump ball situations. And like I said, TCU, this is just a game where that they're going to come out and they're going to look to attack Nate. That opening game against Stanford, I'll be honest, I didn't watch the second half, but I was thinking, hey, Stanford's going to win the game. And then TCU really, really made a lot of plays there in the second half to end up getting a win. Nate, one of the things that has stood out to me is that TCU has done a good job getting after the quarterback. Several guys with a sack and a half, and they've done a good job just making an effort to put some pressure. Jumping over to UCF, with Gus Malzahn, they're running this spread offense, and they're going to be a run-first team. Nate, this blew my mind. As a team, 838 rushing yards in 2 games. I mean, that's crazy. I realize the competition has not been great, but that's unbelievable, Nate. And of course, we have talked about a lot here on Break the Huddle. We've talked about Toledo transfer Penny Boone. We thought he was going to kind of be the main man, and he's had a good season. But really for UCF, it's been about R.J. Harvey, 30 carries, 268 yards, and Nate, 6 touchdowns already on the year for him. But they've got a 4-headed monster. You got Harvey, you got Boone, Miles Montgomery. Their backup quarterback, Jakari Brown, has got almost 100 yards rushing, and then KJ Jefferson. So, Nate, this is going to be a run-first team. I'm interested to see, how KJ looks because, Nate, eventually in the Big 12, they're going to have to throw the football. So we both know that they're going to have to show that they can throw the football. But look, I still think with just their kind of unique offense, they're still going to be able to run the ball and run it well. Jumping over to UCF's defense, Nate, the big thing that stands out to me, I want to talk about TCU's passing game because looking at the reverse, UCF on the season, and granted it's only 2 games, 1 sack. So they have got to find a way with their front 4 and their front 7 to get some pressure. If they don't, Josh Hoover and Savion Williams is absolutely going to carve them up. So it's interesting, Nate, this line, UCF 2.5. I feel like TCU should be favored, but I'm taking the Golden Knights. I just think with their unique running game, with their ability just to throw a lot of different backs at you, and KJ Jefferson just being a big physical presence, I think UCF's going to be able to wear down TCU. They're not going to want to, they're going to get tired in the second half. They're not going to want to tackle KJ and Penny Boone for 4 quarters. And I think UCF ends up with their running game having a big day. I think they win this one there in Fort Worth.
Yeah, Brad, you brought up some great points, and you mentioned transfer quarterback KJ Jefferson coming over from Arkansas. Look, this is the closest thing Gus Malzahn has had to Cam Newton in his college coaching career. They're going to rely on the run. Like you mentioned, they have R.J. Harvey, they got Penny Boone, they got KJ Jefferson, and they probably combined for – not only did they combine for 800 yards rushing, they probably combined for 800 pounds on the field at one time, if we're being honest with each other, if you were to get that split back formation. Nonetheless, it's going to be a tough game for both of these teams. I also want to mention, Josh Hoover, the quarterback for TCU. He's done a phenomenal job, 620 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 0 interception, young guy. A lot of guys will probably remember this name when I bring it up. Wide receiver JoJo Earl, former wide receiver at the University of Alabama. He's been slow start. They've kind of been easing him into the season. He's ready to go for this game. And you wonder, Brad, is that going to make a difference against this UCF defense? We know they're focused heavy on the run. They're going to look to keep TCU's offense off the field. And how do you do that? You run R.J. Harvey and Penny Boone and KJ Jefferson. Now, to that point, you mentioned they're going to have to throw it eventually. If it comes to the point where they stack the box, they need to force KJ to throw this ball. KJ is not the most accurate passer. We know he's a run-first quarterback, probably a first read and go. He's not going to go through his progressions. He's not going to look 3 or 4 down the field. He's going to look maybe 1, 2, and he's gone. They got to keep a spy on him, which is going to open up that secondary. It's going to force KJ to make some throws. They're going to take their chances if they're smart enough under Sonny Dykes. But in the end, I think that UCF prevails in this one. They're just so much more physical up front, not only in the run game, but just offense and defensive line. Give me UCF in a close one, 34-31 on the road to get their first Big 12 win of the season. Let us know in the comments who you believe will win this game out in Fort Worth. Our next game will bring us out to the Northeast, to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the West Virginia Mountaineers hit the road to take on the Pitt Panthers. This is a 3:30 kickoff on ESPN2. Primetime game on primetime ESPN2. West Virginia currently favored in this one by 5.5 points. They're playing at Acrisure Stadium. I hope I pronounced that right. In the Steelers Stadium where they always play. And Brad, big rivalry, the backyard rivalry. We were just talking about it off camera. These two teams hate each other. I mean, we look around the nation at some of these top rivalries, Oregon State, the Civil War rivalry. Apple Cup out west with Washington State. But the backyard rivalry is probably one of the best matchups of every year. And by the way, the last 6 out of 7 games that these two teams have played each other have come down to the last possession. So this is going to be a big rivalry. Garrett Green, we look at head coach Neil Brown for West Virginia. And then on the other side, you got head coach Pat Narduzzi. And This is your classic blue blood rivalry, the backyard rivalry. You think about your buddies, your neighbors coming out to play football in the backyard. starting some fights, over some stupid call. This is going to be one of those games. I'm not worried about the spread or the over-under for this game. I want to see what the over-under is of how many people get ejected and how many people get into fights. Brad, I'll turn over to you. Thoughts on this backyard rivalry and who comes out with the win?
Yeah, so start with West Virginia. Nate, you mentioned Neil Brown, and what a turnaround. He was on the hot seat going into last year, and they had a really, really good year. And they start off 1-1. Of course, they got really, I would say, dominated by Penn State in week one, and then had a good win last week. But they run this air raid offense. Garrett Green, who I'm impressed with. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He doesn't have the greatest arm, but he just does a good job just spreading the ball around. They've got a really good running back in C.J. Donaldson, who is 6'2", close to 240 pounds, and you think about this air raid offense, you don't really think about having a running back that physical, but he fits really, really well into the system. And then he's kind of the thunder, and then your lightning is sophomore Jaheim White, goes about 5'7". So they've got a nice little 1-2 punch with these guys, and I think that is going to be key. Look, West Virginia is going to want to throw the football around, but having these guys and keeping that balance is always key for West Virginia. For Pitt, look, Pat Narduzzi has been great at Pitt. He's been there a while. It's his culture in there. They're blue collar. They're bringing their lunch pail. But they had a down year last year. I mean, this is a team that won the ACC a couple years ago. They were in the Peach Bowl and then had a really, really tough season. He is completely shaken up the offensive staff. I believe, Nate, they have got new offensive coaches everywhere. They hired their offensive coordinator from FCS school, Western Carolina. He brought a couple of transfers in, most notably their running back, Desmond Reed, who is off to a really, really good start, 293 yards on the year. And Alabama fans, you're going to be familiar with their starting quarterback, Eli Holstein, who was very, very highly rated a couple years ago coming out of Louisiana. He is the starting quarterback for Pitt. And Nate, through 2 games, we've seen some downs, but we've seen some ups. This is a mobile guy. He's a big guy, and the arm strength has been evident. 6 touchdowns to 2 picks. So he's young. He's going to continue to get better and better. Nate, want to mention a guy that I think is going to play a big part of this game. When you think about West Virginia, and look, they're going to run the ball, but they want to pass it. Nate Matlack, the senior defensive end for Pitt, he's got 2 sacks on the year. He's going to be key in slowing down Garrett Green and that West Virginia passing attack. This game, I mean, man, it's still just a toss-up to me, man. You can throw out stats and everything when it comes to these rivalry games. I'm taking West Virginia in this one. I think that Garrett Green and that 1-2 punch at running back just makes a few more plays. I think Eli Holstein in his 3rd career start, I think he feels the pressure of the moment a little bit. I think he makes a mistake in the 4th quarter, and West Virginia wins a very, very close one in the backyard brawl.
Great pick, Brad. Great pick. And to your point, I mean, you can throw out all the stats on this game. You can talk about what these 2 teams have done leading up to the backyard rivalry, but all that matters is who's the best team come Saturday. We often hear, any given Saturday, right? I think that was the quote of Josh Pate last year on his tour around the country, but it's true, and it remains true. You can have the best stats in the world, but when you step in between those white lines on come Saturday, look, it's anyone's game. And with that being said, I think some of the keys to victory are, for one, West Virginia quarterback Garrett Green, he's got to use his feet more. You got to get him outside the pocket. You got to get him moving, making plays on the move, because to your point, defensive line of Pitt are going to be coming after him. And if they keep him contained, it's going to be a long, long game for Garrett Green. On the other side, look, both teams are going to want to win the time of possession. I'm looking at my handy-dandy notebook over here, Brad, of notes from research, and both teams are going to want to win time of possession. This is going to be a very physical ground game up front win, in my opinion, whoever comes out on top in this one. And I think it's going to be a pretty low-scoring game. In the end, I'm taking West Virginia. I think the West Virginia defensive line is going to be able to fluster this young quarterback and Eli Holstein. I think he's a good quarterback. He's got a little bit of time to develop. I think he's still listed as a freshman, if I'm not mistaken, due to redshirt. But it's going to be a tough environment for West Virginia. They got to limit penalties. They got to play smart, disciplined football. If they can do that, I'm taking them to win this one in a close one. Give me West Virginia 28-24 in the backyard rivalry. Be sure to subscribe down below as it helps our algorithm. We appreciate everyone who has already. We appreciate the viewership. Like this video if you liked it and share it with your friends who are big college football fans. And be sure to check out our partner, squadblitz.com, the all-new fantasy college football app, the only way to play college football. And if you're tired of playing in the NFL, your quarterback's already gone down, check out Squad Blitz. You can change out and switch out 140 teams every single week. We'll see you next week. It's time to break the huddle. Hey, YouTube, if you like this content, be sure to subscribe down below for more next week.